Even though the 2008 presidential election is more than a year and a half away, the field of candidates from both parties pretty well set. But, as Bill Schneider reports, there still might be a chance for some latecomers to join the race.
Is it too late for a sleeper candidate to get into the presidential race? The chairman of the South Carolina Republican Party says,
if they're sleeping, they better get awake real quick.
It might not be a problem for well-known figures like former Senator Fred Thompson.
I've certainly seen a lot of excitement for Senator Thompson.
He's a TV star. No problem with name recognition.
More people will watch Fred Thompson every week on Law & Order, 25 million if you include all of the versions of it, than will vote in total in the primary season.
Newt Gingrich has name recognition and a following. So does Al Gore, and an Oscar-winning movie to boot. Is there money out there for a new candidate? Sure. You can only give $2,300 to a candidate, but you can give to more than one candidate.
For most people who are in a position to give $2,300, they can write another check for $2,300.
Right now, only about a third of Republicans and Democrats favor the frontrunners in their parties, Rudy Giuliani and Hillary Clinton. Many polls have shown Al Gore running third among Democrats and Gingrich or Thompson third among Republicans. Looks like voters are open to new choices, especially Republicans. 57% of Republicans want more choices. 57% of Democrats say they're satisfied with the choices they now have.
Democrats would like to have the 2008 election held tomorrow if they could do it.
Are Republicans unhappy because their leading candidates are not conservative enough? This strategist says that's not it.
My sense is that it's not so much an ideological fight as it is an argument over who can win this thing.
This campaign may not be about ideological tests in either party. More likely, it's going to be about finding a winner. Kitty?
Thanks very much, Bill Schneider. Bill, stay with us because joining us with more on the 2008 campaign is Ed Rollins, the former White House political director, and also syndicated columnist Miguel Perez. And gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Ed, I really have to get your comments on Bill Schneider's report.
I think he's exactly right. As always, Bill is one of the most brilliant observers of the game.
We think so.
Those individuals he mentioned do have very high name ID and do have a little base of following. And I think as relates to the Republicans, you've got three kind of not establishment players in Romney, Giuliani, and McCain. And I think McCain, who was the front runner for the last year or so, has really faltered in the last couple months, and I think people are looking for alternatives. Giuliani is an unknown entity outside of New York. He's a national hero because of September 11th, when people really don't know his position, and Romney just hasn't caught fire yet.
Let's take a look at what they've been able to raise. We do have the figures on that. We have Mitt Romney at 20.6 million, Rudy Giuliani at 15 million. I know they have the figures somewhere in, and John McCain at 12.5 million. Miguel, what do you think about that lineup?
What is significant about that is who they're getting the money from and how many people they're getting the money from, as opposed to Obama getting smaller donations from a lot of people. Romney is getting huge donations from very few people. So people are not as invested, I think, in the Romney campaign as they are in the Obama campaign or in the Hillary Clinton campaign.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting to see the breakdown because it's not just the aggregate totals, it's the number of people who've given. And we have some figures on that. John McCain raised $12.5 million from nearly 50,000 donors, but Senator Barack Obama raised $25 million from 100,000 donors. So it's a broader base.
A difference.
Let's ask Bill. Bill, how does that factor in?
It factors in very simply. Obama raised for more people in smaller amounts. What does that mean? He can go back to those people and ask them to give more money. A lot of them gave money over the internet, and $50, $100. He has a real donor base there that he can continue to mine month after month, quarter after quarter. It may be easier for him to sustain his fundraising.
The other thing is he has an emotional attachment he's going out having the largest crowds of anybody. He's asking people for their emails. He has the crusade this time. The real disappointment in this, I think, is John McCain. John McCain has been running for 8 years, did have a political base from 8 years ago, has been mailing nonstop. I get 3 or 4 pieces of mail every week from the McCain campaign, and he not only didn't raise money substantially, he spent money, and when those figures come out, he has a long, hard road ahead.
How important is the internet? I mean, we might see that this really, the connected generation may be giving 25, 30, 50. We may get a good broad base coming from internet participation. Miguel?
It's bigger and bigger every election, and it's going to continue that way. What is significant, though, I think, that is that the race between the Democrats, you have Obama and Hillary so close, and probably a very tight race through the whole primary season. They're going to have enough money to really go at each other and maybe get a little dirty. So in the end, all of that money being raised by the Democrats may benefit the Republicans.
Yeah, how dangerous is it?
Well, it is. I mean, first of all, for the first time in a presidential campaign since probably '76, where you had an incumbent president in the sense of Carter, Republicans have been outraised literally 3-2 by the Democrat candidates, and I think that's a great statement by their part.
Okay. Let's get Bill Schneider. Last comment on this, then we'll go on to some other political topics. Bill?
Well, I asked the reporter who was out in Iowa, to compare the Clinton and the Obama audiences, and he made an interesting point. He said the people who come to the Obama rallies are really thrilled to be there. Many of them are anti-Iraq war, but also a lot of them like his unifying message. You put those two together, it's rare to make that combination. But he said a lot of them are independents, they're Republicans, it's an impressive crowd, and they're very passionate. He said Hillary Clinton's audiences are different. She tends to appeal to core Democratic constituencies, to liberal activists, to trade unions. And those are the kinds of people who often determine the outcome of caucuses.
Let's move on to another topic that's pretty much been consuming the discussion today because we've had some developments, and that's Attorney General Alberto Gonzales. One of his top aides resigns. There's now a letter that says that they may demand subpoenas for some documents and also we have President Bush still vehemently defending him. Let's listen to what President Bush had to say today.
There had been no credible evidence of any wrongdoing, and that's what the American people have got to understand. We had a right to remove them. We did remove them, and there will be more hearings to determine what I've just said. No credible evidence of wrongdoing.
Bill, since you're in Washington, we ask you first, what kind of a buzz is this still having in Washington?
People are waiting expectantly for the Attorney General's testimony on April 17th. He's out there alone with only George Bush behind him. And right now, George Bush ain't much when it comes to political support. The Republicans in Congress are very skeptical about his survival. They want to see how well he can explain and defend himself. And several Republicans, as well as Democrats, have urged him to start by making an apology for misleading Congress.
That's right. Miguel?
Now, how does he explain himself? By saying, look, I was fooled by the White House and by people that were working under me, and they left me completely out, and so I'm sort of like not very bright. Or does he say, I was part of it, and if he was part of it, then he should be resigning already?
This is no longer about doing something wrong as the president. The president clearly was in his right to fire anybody that has a presidential appointment, but it's a question of can Gonzales continue to lead the Justice Department? He clearly misled the Congress. I think his own department has no respect for him at this point in time, and I think to a certain extent to try and go 22 more months as the Attorney General will just hurt this administration terribly.
Well, we'll be discussing this as April 17th approaches. In the meantime, this week Nancy Pelosi received a good deal of criticism for her trip to the Middle East after meeting with Syrian President Assad. What do you, let's start with Bill Schneider since he's in Washington. What do you think is the real sort of bottom line on this? Was this trip a mistake or was it not?
Well, look, she is the leader of Congress, and Congress is a co-equal branch of government. There's a lot of criticism coming out of the White House. It doesn't seem to me she went a great deal further than congressional delegations typically do when they go overseas, and a lot of members of Congress have visited the Middle East, have visited Syria. So the criticism of bad behavior, that's an odd usage from the vice president, seemed to me to be very strange.
There was a good bit of focus, though, on one gaffe, and that she said Israel was ready to engage in peace talks with Syria. That immediately shot down, basically, by Israel. Miguel, do you think that these missteps are significant, or is this just...
Absolutely. She's not the Secretary of State, and she doesn't speak for the administration, certainly not for the administration. But at the same time, I think our government should be united when it comes to dealing with the so-called axis of evil. And all of those countries that represent the axis of evil, when we go there, we should go with one voice and one mind. And she's sort of,
She is the presiding officer,
that.
and I would argue this is quite different than a congressional delegation. A congressional delegation seldom basically tries to carry a message from one country to another.
Yeah.
And I think to a certain extent, she's still in her honeymoon period, but I think to a certain extent she's not making a very favorable impression, and I think she has given Republicans and the radio talk show types an opportunity to go beat up on her as opposed to beating up on Gonzalez, the president.
As did the Washington Post. There's a quote we have from that. As any diplomat with knowledge of the region could have told Mrs. Pelosi, Mr. Assad is a corrupt thug whose overriding priority at the moment is not peace with Israel. The really striking development here is an attempt by a Democratic congressional leader to substitute her own foreign policy for that of a sitting Republican president.
Well, she got 148,435 votes, and she needs 62 million if she wants to act like president.
All right, last point, quick. President Bush is headed to Yuma, Arizona on Monday, another border event talking about border security and immigration reform. How significant, Bill, do you think this is?
Well, if he wants to make a strike for, a policy that could be his legacy and the legacy for his party, he might try to make a deal with Democrats to pass his immigration reform bill, or what he calls the immigration reform, because the Democrats, that's the one issue on which he's likely to get cooperation from a lot of Democrats.
Miguel?
Set members of his administration just last week were floating ideas that are even more conservative, not to the liking of the Democrats at all. Basically, what he's telling the public now is that, look, we want you to give them a long, long time before they become citizens and voters.
Stretching out the time.
Long, hard battle before anything happens. I'd be very doubtful if they get anything this year. They made this session, but not this year.
All right. Thanks very much. Ed Rollins, Miguel Perez, and Bill Schneider, thank you for being with us.
Sure.
Coming up next, Heroes, our weekly tribute to the men and women serving this country in uniform. We'll have the story of Black Hawk pilot awarded the Bronze Star for his courage under